Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you. Hope you've had a good Sunday so far. And tonight, our service is going to begin with a couple of hymns that will follow this video straight away. They're hymns that are off our playlist. They might certainly the second one will be familiar to you. The words "Rock of Ages, cleft for me," but to a slightly different tune. Hopefully, you'll enjoy that. So you can sing along with that if you get to know the tune. The first one might be a new one to you, "O Lord, my rock and my redeemer," but they're both beautiful hymns. So hopefully you'll enjoy listening to those or singing along if you can. And then our speaker tonight is well known to us. It's Sydney Elliott. And he's just begun a series over at Grace Church on Sunday mornings on Psalm 23. And so we're going to watch last week's Sunday morning sermon, which is the first in the series. And so he's going to preach for us tonight. And at the end of that video, then if you that will be the end of our service for this evening, and there may well be a hymn on the end of that as well, just to finish off, but that's kind of where we are tonight. And then after that, at 7:30, if you want to come back, and we'll go on Facebook Live as usual, just to finish off the day together. So hopefully that's self-explanatory, but thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for your prayers and for your best wishes this morning as well. Thank you, Eric, for that video for tomorrow. But anyway, enjoy the service this evening, enjoy the hymns, and I'll see you at 7:30 on Facebook Live.
You broke my bonds of sin and shame. Next time you're in the M6, why not call in at T-Bay Services? In the foyer you'll see a picture and a plaque dedicated to this man here. His name, Isaac Cookson. You can also read about his story in the Museum of Lakeland Life in Kendal. Isaac was a shepherd who knew the names of all his sheep. And wherever the weather, he would head out and rescue those in danger. A committed Cumbrian shepherd. Psalm 23 is all about another committed shepherd. In fact, it was written by a committed shepherd, and it's all about a committed shepherd. With so much upheaval and uncertainty in these days, we're going to look at Psalm 23, perhaps the best known and best loved of the Psalms. It was Martin Luther, the Reformer, who said, "The nightingale sings its sweetest when the night is at its darkest." And then he said this, Psalm 23 is the nightingale of the Psalms. It's the sweetest of David's songs, a song for dark and difficult days. It's certainly a psalm that's dried many tears, calmed many fears. It's given courage to the living and comfort to the dying and help to the hurting. Obviously, Psalm 23 is written from an Old Testament perspective, but from a New Testament perspective, we know that the shepherd is none other than Jesus. And we'll see that as we go through. If it wasn't for lockdown, I was hoping to go maybe to a farm and ask the farmer if I could make this recording with a flock of sheep in the background. That would have been a great backdrop. But instead, I have a friend whose dad is a sheep farmer, and he took this footage, and I guess for now this is as good as it gets. Have a look at this, would you? Wasn't that good to see? A pity about the table manners. I guess, like me, most of us were born and brought up in a city. Not too many sheep in Glasgow or in Liverpool. Well, not sheep. And the only chance we get to see some sheep maybe is if we're into spring watch or we head off on holiday to Wales or the lakes. And so as we go through Psalm 23, we need to wrap up, put on the old cap, grab our muddy boots, and try to put ourselves into David's shoes, into his shepherd's sandals, so that we understand and appreciate what's really going on here, what he's trying to say. Okay, today, by way of introduction, 4 questions. Who, when, where, and what? Here we go. First of all, who? There's really no debate or doubt as to who wrote this psalm. It was penned 3,000 years ago by David, His Royal Highness King David. But please remember, long before David was a king, David was a shepherd boy out in the hillside looking after his dad's sheep. And it's interesting, when Samuel the prophet came to his dad's house, he wanted to see all the sons of Jesse, all of David's brothers, and Dad forgot all about young David. But listen, God didn't forget about David. And now David says, what I've been To my sheep on the hillsides, God has been to me. In fact, God has been to me 1,000,000 times over. He is my shepherd. Of course, this is a familiar picture of God and his people in the Bible. In fact, this analogy is used over 400 times in several of the Psalms. Also in Isaiah chapter 40, we find God feeds his flock. He gathers and carries his lambs. He leads them tenderly and gently. Away back in Genesis, when Jacob lay dying, he refers to God as the shepherd of his entire life. Ezekiel, God compares himself to a shepherd. And of course, in the New Testament, Jesus claims to be the shepherd of his believing people. And here David uses the same picture, the same analogy. That's the who. Next, the when. Some say David wrote this, he composed this when he was young, with the future ahead of him. Others say David wrote this as an old man, looking back on his life. I think I agree with that. Usually we call this the shepherd's psalm. It really should be called the sheep's psalm. David, as it were, gets down on all fours and he views life from the level of a sheep. And it's a statement of faith. It's his personal testimony. I've enjoyed the peace that the shepherd brings. I've enjoyed his provision and his protection, his guidance, his goodness, his grace, all the days of my life. So he writes this with the benefit of hindsight. He's a mature man. And the opening part of verse 1 really is a summary of David's God story. And everything else follows and flows from that opening statement. Everything else is an explanation and an expansion of that. The Lord is my shepherd. I guess when we're younger, we seem to think that we need lots, we need plenty, more stuff. But when we get a little bit older, we start to live more simply. We downsize and we keep what we actually need and discard the rest. Well, here's David. He downsizes. He gets rid of everything. And he's left with his divine shepherd. He's all I need. I have God. I have him as my shepherd. And that's enough. He's enough. Would you notice, please, there's no prayer, there's no plea, there's no petition. It's just proclamation and praise. In some of David's other psalms, he cries to God for help. He pours out his complaint, but not here. As an old man, he still loves God and lives for God. It's not back there in the dim and distant past. No, it's right here, right now, a relevant reality, up to date, an ongoing experience. And notice too, please, that Lord is in capitals. Do you see that? The Lord is my shepherd. That is to say, Jehovah, the covenant God. This is how God introduced himself to Moses, the I am, Jehovah God. And to the Jews, this was most sacred. And it was only ever used once every year. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies and whisper the name of Jehovah. And that was it. But amazingly, David here says, this God, this covenant God, Jehovah God, has been with me each and every step of the way. And he still is. And he's still doing the job. He's still doing the business. Also, it's in the first person. It's him and God in him. He's in a close, intimate relationship with God. And he tells us how God has proven himself to him over and over and over again. It's easy, isn't it, when we get older to become sad and sour and maybe a bit cynical. Not David. When David speaks of God, his God, Jehovah God, he starts to sing. Our hearts break, don't they, when we see unconverted people, those that we love, maybe family members, friends, and they don't have this relationship with God. They don't know God as their shepherd. Do you remember Jesus? He stood on top of the Mount of Olives and he looked over Jerusalem and he wept. Why did he weep? Here's why. He wept because the people of Jerusalem were shepherdless sheep. Sheep without a shepherd. And his heart was breaking. And our hearts break as well for those that we love and hold dear, that they too might know the Lord as their shepherd. So who? This was written, this was composed by David. When? When David was an older man. Next, where? Where does this psalm sit? That's important. Psalm 23 is part of a trilogy. Psalm 22, 23 and 24 go together. They're all messianic psalms. In other words, they point to Jesus, the coming Messiah, the coming King. And we know, don't we, in Luke's Gospel chapter 24, Jesus explained to his disciples that the Old Testament spoke about him, pointed to him. And these three psalms certainly point to Jesus. In John's Gospel, Jesus claimed to be the Good Shepherd. In Hebrews, he's called the Great Shepherd. Peter, in one of his epistles, says he's the Chief Shepherd. So Psalm 22, it's quoted when Jesus is on the cross, when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That comes from Psalm 22. Also, Psalm 22 speaks about crucifixion, the Messiah's hands and feet being pierced. So Psalm 22 is Jesus, the Good Shepherd, giving his life for the sheep. Psalm 23, Jesus, the Great Shepherd, leading his sheep, feeding his sheep, guarding and guiding his sheep. And Psalm 24, he's the Chief Shepherd, returning for his sheep. Some of the old commentators put it like this: Psalm 22, the cross; Psalm 23, the crook; Psalm 24, the crown. Psalm 22, the shepherd dies for us; Psalm 23, the shepherd lives for us; and Psalm 24, the shepherd comes again for us. So please remember, would you, that the Bible is part of a big salvation story. We can't read the Bible in isolation. No, we must read the Bible and read this psalm in the sweep and full flow of God's gospel rescue plan. So, first question, who? Second question, when? Third question, where? Next, what? What's David actually saying here? The Lord is my shepherd. We said earlier, didn't we, that this phrase, this opening statement holds the rest together. Everything else flows from here. Because the Lord is my shepherd, says David, I'll not want. In other words, he is more than I need. He's all I ever want. He's enough. He cares for me. He calms me. He protects me. Read down the psalm. He provides for me. He guards and guides me. He's good and he's gracious. And he's not a weak shepherd. No. He's a strong shepherd who'll take me safely home one day. I don't want for anything because I have him. Satisfaction and sufficiency. And David says, all of the above is found in the Lord, in Jehovah, the covenant God, the promise making and the promise keeping God. And don't forget, David was an Old Testament believer. We are New Testament believers. This was penned 1,000 years before Jesus came, and here we are 3,000 years further on from when this was originally written. And we said at the start, Jesus is our shepherd. We know him. I quoted Martin Luther at the beginning. Let me quote Martin Luther again. He said, the personal pronoun my makes all the difference in the world. The Lord is my shepherd. So, you might know the psalm, but do you know the shepherd? In John chapter 10, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives or lays down his life for the sheep. And I know them by name, and they know me, and they follow me. In other words, we must have an individual, personal relationship with him. Maybe as believers, all that's happening to us in these weeks, we're finding extremely challenging. Normally we have the support of other Christians. We're involved in so much, structures and ministries, part of a team, people beside us. We're together, and that's good. That's vital, in fact. Today, individualism is the name of the game. That's our culture. And sadly, that threatens our well-being and fragments relationships and destroys communities. And spiritually, we see that as well. We determine truth for ourselves. Yes, you can believe what you believe, and I'll just believe what I believe. Well, we resist that. And we fight for community, and we fight for accountability, because that helps us in our walk with God, and that helps us to grow more like Jesus. Mutual dependence. But listen, there's a big danger that we become overly dependent, that our faith is shored up and artificially sustained by those around us. And now, when everything's changed and all of these things are removed to a great extent, taken away, and here we are sitting at home, screen streaming, virtual church, maybe the fears and the frustrations that normally lie dormant have come to the fore, and sins have started to surface, and we realize our hearts are horrible and we need help. We can't hide behind our church family or friends the way we used to. And what's left? Is our relationship with God the real deal? Is there intimacy with Jesus? This psalm speaks to that. It's absolutely key. It's crucial that we find satisfaction and sufficiency in him, and that we understand that he is enough. And maybe that's the lesson at the very start of Psalm 23 that we need to take on board. who, when, where, and what. Having introduced the psalm today, next time we'll go through this amazing psalm together, verse by verse. A psalm that starts with our satisfying, sufficient Lord, my shepherd, and ends with him being our satisfaction and sufficiency forever. That's the only way to live. That's the only way to face the future in these dark days, these difficult days, sad days as well as glad days. The Lord is my shepherd. He's all I want. In closing, let me tell you about Helen Roseveare. Helen studied medicine at Cambridge University, and that's where she became a Christian. And then she went to serve in the Belgian Congo, now Zaire, as a missionary doctor. But if you know the story, you'll know that during the Congo uprising in 1964, Helen was captured by the Simba rebels, and she was raped repeatedly and beaten and put in prison. She managed amazingly to escape, and she found herself in the United Kingdom. But when the trouble subsided, guess what she did? She returned to the Congo, to the very same area, the same place, the same people, the same hospital, the same work. And years later, she wrote a book. And in this book, she tells how she found her satisfaction and her sufficiency only in Jesus. And she called the book Enough. The Lord is my shepherd. He is enough.
You would even pardon me and bring me to this place. I stand before your holiness. I can only stand amazed. Send the Savior died to make a covenant of grace. I only want to serve you, bring honor to your name. Though I've often failed you, faithfulness remains. I'll glory in my weakness, that I might know your strength. I will live by presence of your glory demands our endless praise. The one, the only Savior, has opened heaven's doors. We can enter in, free from all our sin.